Hey guys, it's Miss Parrish. I am coming to you today to do our lesson or continue our lesson on area. As you know from yesterday, we started our geometry unit. Mr. Harden started our area lessons. We covered 4 shapes yesterday. We covered squares, rectangles, um, parallelograms, and the rhombus. Now, you did have a piece of paper or a sheet in your Google Classroom, or if you were in class, you have the document that um, has all of the shapes where you filled in the name and you filled in the formula for each shape. So there were 2 shapes on there that we did not do yesterday, and that's the 2 that we're covering today. That's the trapezoid and the triangle. Okay, now all of the shapes yesterday were quadrilaterals. That means they had 4 sides. The 2 shapes we're covering today, the first is the trapezoid. It does have 4 sides as well, so it is a quadrilateral. The triangle, which we will get to next, is not a quadrilateral because most of us know that a triangle only has 3 sides. Okay, tri means 3. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So let's just jump into this. You will need a sheet of paper because it is very beneficial for you to write these examples down. And just like yesterday, you must show your steps or show the work step by step. I told my kids that you have to show your work in at least 3 lines because the most basic formulas will take you at least 3 lines. And then today, the trapezoid is going to probably take more than 3. So please make sure you're showing your work step by step. You can use a calculator as long as you're showing those 3 lines or step by step. So let's jump into trapezoids. As I said, a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. It has 4 sides. The formula for a trapezoid is a little different than some of the ones we did yesterday. They were pretty basic: length times width, base times height. This formula is a little longer, it's a little more complex. So you definitely want to pay attention. You definitely want to do it step by step so you don't make mistakes. Okay, so you will notice that the formula right here, area equals 1/2 times the height times the sum of base 1 and base 2. Okay, if you remember from yesterday, I had my kids write in what the letters meant. So the A stands for area, H is height, just like from yesterday, and B stands for base, just like yesterday. So if you want to write down what those mean, you can do that. H stands for height, and B is a base. Okay. Now, just like we talked about yesterday, and if you watch Mr. Harden's video, when he talked about height, he talked about how when they measure your height at the doctor, you have to be standing straight up and down. Same concept with this one today. When you look at a trapezoid, you have, if you'll notice, there are 2 slanted sides, okay? And then you have a top and a bottom. Now, sometimes a trapezoid can be turned sideways, so you don't want to just always say top and bottom. You have to be really careful about that. On a trapezoid, the big thing to remember is the bases, and it doesn't really matter which one you call base 1 and base 2 because you're just adding those together. But the bases are going to be the parts of the trapezoid that are running parallel to each other. Okay, so if you will notice this line and this line, they run parallel. What we mean by parallel is that they run the same distance apart, and would, if they kept going, they would never touch. When you think of parallel, I want you to think of train tracks. I want you to think about the sides of a ladder. Think of a door frame, all of those things, a window frame. Those things maintain the same distance apart and they never intersect or meet. Okay. So on a trapezoid, you want to find the 2 sides that are parallel. Okay. The same distance apart. Those will be your bases. The height is the line that runs between those 2 bases. It's not very straight, but that is the height. Just like Mr. Harden taught you on the parallelograms yesterday, the height is the straight line. Okay, now you do have these 2 slanted sides. We're not ever going to use these on this formula for trapezoid. Okay, they're slanted. If they continued going, they would intersect. Okay, it's almost like you took a triangle and chopped the top of it off. Okay, so if you kept going, they would almost intersect there. All right, so we don't want to use the slanted sides. If they ever have measurements there, don't use those. That's kind of like when we did parallelogram. I told my kids in class, don't use the slanted side. So when you're looking for the numbers on a trapezoid, you want to find the base. If you look at this example down here, okay, the bases are the two sections that are running parallel. So we'd use those two numbers. Your height is the measurement from base to base. If you had a number here, let's say that we had a number here, like a 6, you would not use that. You do not use the slanted sides. So if they put numbers there, don't do that. It's also very important on your notes to write, notice that when you're finding the area of the trapezoid, okay, don't forget to follow order of operations. Okay, there's several steps here, so we want to follow the order of PEMDAS or the order of operations when we go to solve this. All right, like I said, this formula is a little more complex than the others, so we want to pay attention to what we're doing here. So for this first example, you'll need to draw this trapezoid on your paper, label the parts of it. So if you want to pause this and get that drawn. Usually to draw a trapezoid, you can do two kind of slanted lines like that, wider at the bottom, and then just connect. Okay, some people have trouble drawing those. All right, so the first thing we want to do, as always, is write our formula. So 1/2 times height times, the sum, not sure why I put a 6 there, times the sum of base 1 and base 2. Okay, second step is plug in your numbers. So 1/2 times the height. Now, if I look at my example here, my two parallel sides that are running top and bottom on this one are 11 and 14. So those are my bases. My height, remember, it's that line running straight up and tall on the inside. It kind of looks like an H where it's got that right angle little box. So that is an 8. And then my bases are 11 and 14. And like I said, you don't have to stress on those bases about which one's base 1 and base 2, as long as you've got the correct two numbers. Remember, the commutative property tells us we can put them in any order. Those two, I could have had 14 plus 11 and still get the same answer there. Okay, so according to PEMDAS, I would do parentheses first. So 11 plus 14 is 25. Okay, this one's going to be more than 3 lines, but that's okay. You definitely want to do it step by step. According to PEMDAS, after parentheses, there's no exponents, so I do multiplication and division. Well, half of 8, you can either divide 8 by 2, or you can just say, that one's easy. Half of 8 is 4. And the 4 is touching the parentheses, so that means multiply. So 4 times 25 is 100. Now, just like yesterday on all of the area problems, remember you have to put the units, this case it's centimeters, squared with your answer. So this one would be 100 centimeters squared. Okay, if you need to pause this to copy any of that down, please do so. Okay, the next shape here is another trapezoid. So if you want to draw this one, take a minute and draw it. I'm going to expand my screen just to make sure it's really visible for you guys while you're drawing that. Okay. Now again, start with your formula. A equals 1/2 times the height times the sum of base 1 and base 2. Plug in what we know. My height, again, look for that line running from base to base on the inside. So that's 3. And then 4 plus 7.6. Now, this is definitely a good one to have your calculator for, since there's decimals involved. So take your calculator, and if you'll add 4 plus 7.6, you get 11.6 or 11 6/10. Follow PEMDAS. I'm going to take half of 3. Anytime you take half, just divide by 2. So 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. And then I'm going to multiply. Those are touching. If you don't like the parentheses there, you can put the multiplication sign if that makes you feel more comfortable. So 1 5/10 times 11 6/10 becomes 17 4/10 meters squared. Okay, again, you want to write your formula, plug in your numbers, and follow PEMDAS. Okay, if you need a minute to copy that down, feel free to pause. I know, like I said, this one's probably the hardest one of them all to do, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. All right, here's our last trapezoid. We're just going to do 3 of each since we only have 2 shapes today. So this is our last trapezoid. Now this one looks like it's laying down. It's kind of on its side. So it looks a little different. They're not always, turned straight up like we've seen before. So you have to learn how to identify the base and the height on these things. Okay, so if you need to take a minute and draw this one. Okay, so again, we want to start with our formula. This is going to help you memorize the formulas, writing them every time. So now I have to look a little more carefully at this one. I have to figure out which is the height. Now again, think about your bases. You want the 2 bases are on opposite sides of the trapezoid. They're running parallel on opposite ends. So you wouldn't want the 2 numbers that are beside each other, like the 4.8 and the 4. They're not running on opposite sides. They're not opposite ends of the shape. Take your hands like you're running parallel and say, oh, okay, these 2 ends are the bases. They're running parallel. So that means this line that's running inside right here looks kind of like a sideways H. This is my height. It is the line that is running from base to base. So that is the height. And then base 1 plus base 2. Again, it doesn't matter. I could have put 4.8 plus 2.5. Those can switch out. So according to PEMDAS, I do parentheses first. I'm just going to go ahead and do the X this time instead of the parentheses. 2.5 plus 4.8 on your calculator, that's a time saver, is 7 3/10. Okay, now I'm going to do multiplication from left to right. I know half of 4 is 2. I don't even need my calculator for that. So trapezoids usually have 5 lines of work. So 2 times 7 3/10 becomes 14 6/10 meters squared. Okay, so let's reflect on the trapezoid really quickly. Remember, your bases are on opposite ends of the trapezoid. They're running parallel. Again, think train tracks, think door frame, think ladder, running parallel to each other. And the height is the number that is representing the line running from base to base. Okay, use your formula, plug those numbers in, follow the rules of PEMDAS, and you should be in good shape. Okay, let's go to our second and final shape for today, which is a triangle. Now, all of the shapes up until now, like I said a minute ago, have been quadrilaterals. They have 4 sides. Quad means 4. Triangle, tri, T-R-I, the prefix tri means 3. If you had a tricycle when you were a child, a tricycle has 3 wheels. A triangle is a shape with 3 sides, okay? So for area of a triangle, most of us can identify that, but we don't always know the formula. So the area of a triangle is half the product of the base and height. Now, this is kind of like a rhombus. If you remember rhombus yesterday, we had 2 separate formulas or 2 different formulas that you could use for a rhombus. They both included their diagonals, but on one of them, you could take half at the beginning, or the other one you divided by 2. This is kind of the same thing with the triangle. You have 2 options for formulas on this. Okay, your first formula is A equals 1/2 times the base times the height. Okay, very similar to the rhombus from yesterday, except it had diagonals. Or you can do area equals base times height divided by 2. If you remember from yesterday, the B stands for base, which they've got right here, and the H stands for height. Okay, so you can work either one of these formulas. Now, I will work the examples doing them both ways. You don't have to do them both ways. You may want to write both ways on your notes, but when you do your homework, you can choose whichever one of these you want to use. Okay, whichever one you feel more comfortable using. All right, so make sure you've got those formulas written down, and we're going to do about 3 examples on this. Okay, let's look at the first one. If you need a minute to draw that triangle, take a minute and draw that. Label the measurements. It's kind of a different shaped triangle. Just draw it to the best of your ability. Okay, so my first formula was 1/2 base times height. Okay, so 1/2 times, now remember your base is going to be here. So that's 20 times your height is always going to be that line running from the top to the bottom. Again, like Mr. Harden said, your height, you stand, if you go to the doctor to measure your height, you stand straight up. So this line running down to the base, and like I said, it almost looks like it's making an H right there. Okay, it almost looks like an H for height. That is my height. So I can probably work this one without a calculator. I know half of 20 is 10, and then 10 times 8 is 80. If you need the calculator, that's fine. Again, when you take half, you can just divide the number by 2 if you don't know what it is. So there's no parentheses or anything, so I'm just going to go, since it's all multiplication from left to right, and that's what I did. I did half of 20 and got 10. 10 times 8 is 80. Now I'm going to show you how you could work it using the other formula, the base times height divided by 2. Okay, base is 20, height is 8 divided by 2. Okay, 20 times 8 is 160, and 160 divided by 2 is 80 again. So either way I work it, I get the same answer. Okay, so again, I'm showing you both ways. You can choose whichever formula you want to use on that. Again, if you need to pause the video, feel free to do so. All right, here are our last 2 examples for triangle. Again, I'll work them both ways. So let's draw this first one with the 5 and the 12. 5 inches and 12 inches. Draw that one first. Label. Okay. If I use the 1/2 base times height, 1/2 times my base is 12. My height, now this time your height is not inside, it's not a dotted line, but notice it's making that right angle with the base. Look for that little box that looks like an H. Okay. So 1/2 of 12 is 6, and 6 times 5 is 30. So this would be 30 inches squared. If I use the other formula instead, base times height divided by 2, I would do 12 times 5 divided by 2. 12 times 5 is 60. 60 divided by 2, I ran out of room, so I have to go over here. 30 inches squared. So again, you got 30 inches squared either way that you solved that. Now, I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try this last one on your own. If you've got a calculator, the decimals should not be a problem. If not, you can still multiply that by hand. It's not that hard of a number, so pause it. Okay, hopefully you got that worked out. Again, I will work this using both formulas, depending that way, whichever one you chose, you'll see what you should have done. Okay, now this triangle looks a little different. Okay, so again, here is my base. Okay, my base is going to be 8 1/2, And then my height, notice, is it's on the outside. What the reason they do that is if you'll notice the triangle is slanted. So again, your height is not slanted. So the height runs, okay, from here to here. If they stood that triangle up and measured its height, it would go from here to here. So that's why they have that dotted line. Okay, so 1/2 times 8.5 times 14. Now I'm going to tell you a trick here. Since I'm multiplying and order doesn't change anything, I know it said follow PEMDAS. You can take half of 8.5 on your calculator and divide by 2 and then multiply that by 14. You could also, since you know what half of 14 is, you could even say half of 14 is 7 and then do 7 times 8.5. But I don't want to mess this up, so I'm still just going to do it in order. 8.5 divided by 2 is 4.25. So 4.25 or 4 and 25 hundredths times 14 becomes 59 and 5/10 inches squared. Okay. Again, you could have said half of 14 is 7 and then multiplied 7 times 8.5. You would have gotten the same answer. That's the kind of the cool thing. You could take half of either of those numbers, multiply it times the other number, and still get the same answer. Okay, so I'm going to work it using the other formula for triangle. Again, you don't have to do both. Pick one, pick whichever one. A lot of times people just prefer the base times height over 2. That way they can just multiply the two numbers, divide by 2, and be finished. So, but it's up to you. You have a choice here. Okay, so I've got 8.5 times 14 divided by 2. So on my calculator, I'm going to do 8.5 times 14. I get 119 divided by 2. And surprise, surprise, I got 59.5 inches squared. Okay. So just like yesterday, guys, it's extremely important that you are writing your formula first. You are plugging in the numbers for line number 2, and then you solve it. Okay, it's probably going to take you more than 3 lines. The trapezoid will definitely take you more than 3 lines today. Okay, so I try not to go too fast, but I try not to drag it out. I know long videos kind of wear you guys out. So with only 2 shapes, I hope going through, I'm going to kind of backtrack through these examples. Remember the triangle, you've got the 2 choices. So pick whichever formula you prefer. 1/2 BH or BH divided by 2. Okay. Remember on the trapezoid, I'll go back right quick. We do have the longer formula. That one's a little trickier. So remember your bases, again, are the parallel. I'm going to write that up here. So maybe if you want to write that down back on your trapezoid notes, the bases run parallel to each other. Okay. The height runs from base to base. Okay, I don't know if that'll help or not, but just in case. Okay, so remember you're finding the bases or the 2 sides that are running parallel. Your height is the line running from base to base. And remember on this one, you don't use the slanted sides. Okay, remember height stands up straight and tall. All right, I hope. Oh, let me one more thing on the trapezoid. Remember, once you set up the problem, write your formula, plug in your numbers, and then follow PEMDAS. Okay. I hope this was helpful for you guys. As always, please, please message your teacher, myself, Mr. Hardner, Miss Klein. If you have any questions, we are always happy to help you guys and answer your questions. So I hope you have a great Friday. I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you guys or talk to you soon.